I'm surprised there are so many people here. It's cool. It's great. Is there anybody that did not install the virtual machine? Okay, you all have that. Did you try whether the forms test project actually works? Well, let me ask in a different way. Is there anybody that did not try? So if you do something like this, then you should ideally see that. So working for everybody. Cool. All right. So I updated the demo project in the last week. So I would like you all to run a couple of commands. First of all, git fetch origin. To do not a pull. I'm doing a fetch by intention. Otherwise, it's kind of messing up. I don't know why. Ah, okay. Does anybody have the data of the Wi-Fi? All right, so first run a git fetch origin, please. Then the second thing you would do is reset hard origin, or make sure you're a master. Probably are. Git reset hard origin master. That's where you reset your branch to the one on the origin. And then please do a git pull F force. Actually, you have to do a git pull F dash dash tags to receive all the updated tags. Did everybody like run this stuff? Did it actually work? Does Wi-Fi work? The page doesn't work? What's happening? Ah, you probably have to clear the cache if you try. And try to work with the app dev controller, then you see the error that is happening. So make sure to clear the cache. And is there anybody else that does not have a data folder, like app data, that has an error with that? Because there should be a database in there. But if there isn't, you can run doctrine database create to create a new database. And schema create to insert the database schema, and in the end, app console. Fixtures load to insert the demo data. You can also do doctrine database drop in the beginning if there is a database already. So I will do that here. So then everybody should have a data directory. Okay, can you run the composer update? Dot slash composer. You can just hit the tab, right? Because this composer, yeah, update. All right. So I was just told there is another problem with like use a static controller. Does everybody have that? You need to run a composer update, I guess. I won't do that because it's like quite heavy on the internet connection, but you mean it's just like missing from the configuration file? Anyway, but updating doesn't hurt because, or is it just, isn't it updating anything else? Does it work for you? Yeah, it's just in the beginning when it tries to recalculate all the dependencies, especially with the internet connection. All right, so in the beginning, wow, that's really a lot of people. Exciting. Can you give me that? I think it's from, is it yours? Oh, okay, cool. Did anybody of you work with Symfony before? Oh, quite a lot of you. Did anybody of you work with the Symfony forms before? That's also some. So just for your information, the workshop in the morning, the session in the morning is going to be an absolute beginner session. So we are going to we'll start from scratch with like Symfony forms, especially for the people that didn't work with Symfony before. In the afternoon, we will cover some of the more advanced topics to also satisfy the people that worked with Symfony forms before. So did anybody not use PHP ever in his life? All right. Did anybody not use Symfony before? Did you use some kind of other framework, like MVC, multi-view controller stuff? Okay, you didn't. All right, some of the things might be a bit new to you, but basically just follow the examples and that should work. So the workshop will be a mix of theory, which I'm presenting in form of slides, and tasks that you can solve on your own. We will, basically I will also always give you the theory, like present you some concepts and then give you a task which you can work on by yourself. And then I will, if it's necessary, I will show it in front, like how the task can be solved. Sorry? Okay. And yeah, that's the idea. Or we'll see how that works out, and if it doesn't, we'll do something else. All right. So how about the composer status? Is it still loading? Oh yeah, no works. Just hit enter. When you in the end of the composer update, you get like suggestions for parameter files just hit enter. You don't need to change anything. When you do that, clear the cache afterwards, and then it should work. The USB stick again? Anybody else? Yeah. So if you drop the database, you can add -- force, of course. Otherwise, it won't do it. Yeah. When you load the database, you have to click yes for purging, like removing the data that was there. And yeah. How about you? How's it going? Okay. I'm sorry for the hassle at starting the project. So anybody else that is still having problems with the use a static controller missing statement, you have to make sure that the app config parameters YAML file contains these last entries. You can't delete it. Why not? Or can you just override it? Ah, okay, just cancel. What you can do is go inside? Just copy everything? Oh. So welcome to the Symfony2 forms trainings. Today, I never had so many people in my training before. So I hope this kind of works because I don't have anybody to help you out. Usually I like to do the training and then help everybody as he's or she's working on the code. We'll see how that works with so many people. But yeah, I'm probably doing a lot of running around today, so it's good for me. My name is Bernhard Schussek, or Bernhard Schussek would be the German pronunciation. My Twitter handle is WebMozart, and I was doing a lot of work on the form component in the last couple of years. So I want to show you how to use that component in practice today. So I was Symfony core developer, blah, blah, blah. Right, let's start with the domain model of the demo project that we use today. Did you already open the browser and look at the different pages, look at what is there already? If you did, you see that we're dealing with kind of an space strategy game here. Very simple one, of course. The domain model is very simple as well. Basically, we have ships that you can create. Every ship has some kind of a ship class, like freighter or destroyer or whatever, that defines the capabilities of that ship. And then ships can have a number of mount points. Each of the mount points can load either one or no equipment. So for example, a ship of class freighter could have 2 mount points, and to each of the mount points you can give some equipment that exists. All right? And every ship can have payload items as well. And it's basically the same as mount points. A payload is the combination of some good, like iron or gold or whatever, and the mass, which is stored in the property of the payload class. So for example, if the property contains 10, that would mean 10 tons of whatever good is associated. All right? So if we create an object model, so an example would be a ship that's called Liberty, maybe. It's of class Corvette. It's got 4 mount points. 2 of them are loaded with an equipment of type laser. That's called laser. And 1 of them is loaded with an equipment called torpedo. And then the ship also has a payload item with a mass of 10 and the associated good iron. So that's an example for our domain model. As you see, that's very simple, and we will use that simple model to create a couple of forms today to learn about different topics. In the beginning, we will start with a simple form for just the good class. And yeah, with that we're starting. Any questions about the domain model? In general, if you have any questions while I'm speaking, this is a workshop, it's not a presentation, so just please raise your hands, or even just ask. It's not a problem. Probably everybody else is having the same question as you do, and so everybody's benefiting. All right, so the first topic is the most fundamental way to create forms with Symfony. It's called array-based forms. And the reason for that is simple. If we have an object that we want to modify, that is stored in the database, or even if we don't have an object, but we just have some data that we want to modify, then we can format that data as array and push this array into a form, change, modify the form, submit it, and we will receive the modified array from the Symfony form component. So that's very simple. Probably. Can everybody read the slides, especially the people in the back? Okay. So the way to do that with Symfony, does that work from the contrast as well? In the back? Can you read that? Okay, cool. So the way to create the form with Symfony in your controller, we will see later on what the controller is for those people that don't know that, is to create the helper method to call the helper method create form builder. then add all the fields that you want to add. The names of the fields in this case correspond to the keys in the array, all right? And then call getForm. GetForm returns a form instance that it will use later on. The add method expects either just one argument, which is the name, as I just told you, and the key in the array. In this case, the field will be a text field automatically. Or you can provide the type of the field as second argument. There's a couple of types available in Symfony, such as text, such as submit for submit buttons, checkbox, choice for drop-downs, and many more. But we'll look at them later on. In your controller, there are two different ways of setting the data that is displayed in the form by default. Either when you create the form builder, you can call setData on the form builder. You will just pass the data, for example, the array, to that form builder. And this data will be displayed when you load the form for the first time. So it's very useful for editing existing data from your database. And the second way is when you already called getForm and have the form object, then you can call setData on the form object or on any of its fields. So just change the value of one field, for example. To submit the form, you will call handle request. The request object is a Symfony object that you just passed there. The form will then check if it was submitted, and if so, it will update itself with data present in the request object. And then after that, you can check if the form is valid by calling the isValid method and do some stuff based on that result. So the workflow for most Symfony forms is like this. You load a page that displays the form, like the unmodified form, like get goods new. Then there is some template that is rendered in the controller. You create the form, then you render the template. The form is shown. When you submit the form, you submit to a different URL with a post request, not a get request, where you call the handle request method. The handle request method updates the form if it is necessary. And then you can check if the form is valid, and if it is not, you will render the template again. Otherwise, you can redirect to some page that mentions that the form was displayed, submitted successfully. Does anybody have an idea why we use two different URLs for these things and not just one? Refreshing is a very good point, yeah. Any other ideas? Sorry? Reusability is a very good point. In what context? In what context, reusability? Right. In Symfony, it's very common to use the same pages that you use for forms for a REST API. Is there anybody that did not hear of REST APIs before? You all know what REST APIs are. That's good. So that's why we separate that. This action is just for the UI. That's just displaying the new form. While this action can be used by the API as well, right? You can just submit your post request there via a REST client and use the same thing. All right. So when we created the form, we need to pass it to a template from the controller. For that, we will call createView to transform the form in its view representation. This will be another kind of object that presents all kinds of information that is necessary and useful in the template. So for example, the IDs of the fields are present in the view object, the names of the fields, the HTML values, all that stuff will be in the view object that is returned. In the template, in case of Twig, we just use the form helper and pass that form object to the helper, and it will output the complete form. We'll learn later on how to do that in a more customized fashion. And then after submitting the form, we can get the data just as we set it in the beginning. So in the beginning, we called set data on the form. Now we can just use get data to read the array of the modified values back in, or of a single field if you want. Okay? So the first task for you would be to create a form for modifying goods. Goods are very simple. They just have two fields. They have the field name and price per ton. And I would like you to create forms for creating new goods and for updating existing goods. And for that, you have to go to the controller, good controller. It's in the Deep Space 1 game bundle. And basically apply the knowledge that I just brought you. I can go back to the previous slides if it's necessary for you. And yes. The second thing is to add validation constraints. I will show you how that works when we're at that. Okay, go. For the people that didn't use Symfony before, you can ask me how to, like, especially how controllers work. I can show you. Yeah, perfect. Did you try it? Use the app dev controller. If you debug in your browser and you have a white screen, make sure that you use the app_dev.php controller, because then you get an exception message and you see the error that you have. So if you're done with the form, you can try to add some validation constraints. That's like the second bullet on the list. Validation constraints, wait a minute, can be added to when you add the fields in the third argument. The third argument is an array of constraints, an array of options, actually. And in this array of options, you can add constraints. I'll show you how that works. So you probably are doing something like this in your controller. And now if you customize the third argument, which is an array, you can pass a couple of options to configure the fields. And one of these options is the option constraints. To the constraints option, you can pass one or more constraints from the validator component. You can find all of these constraints online on, in the validator documentation. There's a reference. And some useful constraints are, for example, not null. With that constraint, you can validate that a field is not null, as it's said, or not blank, actually. You can also do something like length. Where you can pass a min length, for example, 2 characters. Then for other fields, you would probably need, for example, new, greater than, or equal, things like that. And if you add these constraints, then you should see validation error messages in your form as soon as you submit an invalid value or leave the field empty or anything like that. Others that you might use are greater than, etc. If you need anything else, you can just add it to your form. If you need any other constraints, check in the Symfony documentation under reference. There's a reference validation constraints section. So somebody had a question before, right? Okay. Can I use the app dev controller in the browser? After form eset sc slash, thank you, slash app underscore dev .php slash, right. One more thing that I forgot to mention in the slides, I showed you that you submit the form to the post action, like to a different action than the one that you use to process the form. So here we have the new action that is displaying the form for the first time, and this action just accepts the method get, right? You want to submit the form to a different action with the method post that is down there. And you do that, you can change the method, like the action of the form, by calling the setAction method on the builder. The setAction method simply receives the URL of the page that should submit or should receive the submitted form, right? So with Symfony, this would be generate URL and then the route name of the controller that is receiving the form. Right? And if you do that, the form will be submitted to this action, and you have to build the form here again, call handle request, check if the form is valid, get the data, and move it to a new good instance. Does it make sense? Is this working for you? Still not. So what's the problem? That sucks. Okay. So the Wi-Fi with your phone is not working? But sorry, do you have a mobile internet connection? And it's not working either. Do you have any more questions? So about the namespace from the constraints, for anybody that does not have auto-completion in the IDE, you can either find them in the reference documentation. I will open that for you. So if you go to the documentation, reference, you have validation constraints reference, where you have the different constraints that you can use. All right, okay, but you, all right. Where? Ah, yeah, right. No, what do you mean? In the table? Ah, right, yeah. Right, in the API you find the complete path, and all the constraints, or most of the constraints, are in this namespace. still have my USB stick. Okay. So that's the complete project. Now you can try to replace the project in the VM with the complete project from zip. Maybe rename that first, and then just unzip. Is that how you feel right now? We just extract here. It's taking off now. Maybe you have to fix some permissions afterwards, because that's from my computer with my permissions. I don't have any idea, but try it. I hope it works. Okay. Is anybody still having problems? I will go now to I will show you how to solve the project. If you have any problems yourself, then you can follow me and see if you did a mistake. For the people that weren't successful yet in solving it, you can see how it works. All right, so we would start a new action. You probably did this. You created a form builder. You added the different fields. We add the field name, we add the field price per ton, right? And we can add the different constraints here as well. For example, let's say that the name has to have at least 2 or maybe 3 characters. And the price has to be as well not null. It can't be left empty. And it has to be greater than 1, for example. You will find how to use these constraints in the reference documentation. Okay? Then we add a submit button. We could call the submit button create, because we're creating the form. And then we pass the form to the view. But we have to convert into the view instance to load all the information that we require in the template. All right? Like IDs and names, attributes, HTML attributes, all that stuff can be found in that view that is created here. Okay? So if we go to the template, we will render the form and see what happens. All right, so we have a form for a new good now. You can try to enter something, enter some data. We get this error. As we see, we are already at the new action that we used as submit action. We will check that out in the controller. It's a create action. The create action is configured to use the same template as the new action, but the form variable used in the template cannot be found because we didn't pass it here. And that's why we get this error. Variable form does not exist.
Can you zoom a bit?
The code. Yeah, I will increase the font size. Does it work?
Yeah, thank you. You can start a presentation.
Sorry?
On the view menu point, you can start a presentation.
There's a presentation? Ah. It's pretty awesome.
And there's a little trick because then you have this left view. It disappeared.
Sorry?
You don't have the file tree now, but if you open another project, there you have it, so you got to start the presentation mode with another project. Open, and then this one is like presentation mode with the menu on the left side.
Oh, interesting. I need to look at that more closely. It's pretty awesome. Can everybody read that now? In the back? I think it's better now, right? Okay. So we created the form. Now we want to create the same form in the create action to handle the submission, right? So we can, in the beginning, we can either just copy it over, or we can extract it into a new method like create form. That's a name that I usually use. It's kind of a weird name, but it makes sense as soon as we make the edit form and call it create edit form as well. All right, let's pass the form to the view and see if the error goes away. As you see, we have the form now. We are still at the post action, but the data is not there. Any idea what the problem is? Just shout it out. Huh? No data. Right, we need to handle the request. Okay. Mr. Presentation Mode, any idea how to switch back to? That's interesting. So much about the presentation mode. All right, so we're back now. Create action, we will call handle request. And then we check if the form is valid. And in case the form is valid, we save all the data in the database. So let's see in the beginning if handle request is fixing our problem. All right, so we have the form. We can submit it. We keep the data of the form. Now we can check that the form is valid, and in that case, create a new good and store all the data in the good that was submitted with the form. We then need to call persist on the Doctrine Entity Manager. I hope everybody or most of you used Doctrine before. Persist basically tells Doctrine to store that object in the database. And after that, we redirect to the list of the goods, and we should see the new good there. Sorry? Thanks. So there it is. All right? And now we want the same thing for the edit action, which is very similar. We have edit action here. Basically, it's the same thing as the new action. We create the form. But in this case, we also want to set the existing data of the good instance that is edited in the form. Okay? So again, basically we just copy the create form method, make a create edit form. We can pass the good instance here, and then we can call set data, set the data of the fields to the one of the good. In this case, we don't want to use the goods create action, but the one which is used to update the goods, and that's goods update. We can also call the submit button update, for example. All right? And otherwise, this method is just the same as before. So let's try to use that. Do the same thing that we had in new HTML twig. In edit HTML twig, just output the edit form. And let's see what happens. Yeah?
Can you slow a bit down?
Yeah, of course. Sorry. Thought all of you had solved it anyway. All right. Just for your information, you don't have to follow all the code here. I have added different tags to the repository, so you can just check out the finished code of the first task after this presentation here. I can show you how to code the controller, and then you can just check out the code, so you don't need to follow every step that I'm doing here, like on your own computer. You can just really focus on that if you want. Okay? So if we output the edit form in the Twig template, we can see what's happening now. Some mandatory parameters are missing to generate a URL for root goods updates. Any idea what the problem is? Right. So when we call goods update here, we also need to pass the ID of the good that we are updating. All right, so now we have the good, the form. We have the data that is already present in the database from that set data call. And now we can try to change the data and submit the form again. No root found for post goods 5. Method not allowed. Allow put and delete. The problem here is that, as I told you before, Symfony tries to use the HTTP keywords to process forms when they are submitted. The post keyword is usually used to submit new data to a server, to append it to some list. And if we want to modify existing data, then the proper HTTP keyword usually is put. Forms by default use post to submit, but you can change the method by calling set method on the form builder and change it to put of the edit form. All right? We need to go back, reload actually. And now we have the same problem as before. Variable edit form does not exist in edit HTML Twig. Let's see what is happening in the update action. Of course, the edit form is not yet passed to the template. So we can just do the same thing that we did in edit action. Create the edit form, pass it here. And handle the request. We'll see what's happening now. All right, now we could successfully submit it. We keep the data that we enter, but the data is not yet saved in the database. And in order to do that, we will do the same thing as before. We just update the if condition. We check that the form is valid. And if the form is valid, it's called edit form now. We update the good with the information contained in the form. Since the good is already loaded from the Doctrine database, all that is required to save this instance is to call flush on the Doctrine entity manager. Since Doctrine knows about the good instance, it will check that the good instance was modified. And if the good instance was modified here, flush will save the modification to the database. And as you can see, test 2, 5 credits, the data is updated now. we are redirected to the goods list. And that's happening here at the end of this if block that is only executed if the form is valid. Are there any questions about the first task? All right. If you didn't manage to solve the code yourself, you can go to the command line of your project and do git checkout force if you want task 1 complete. That will just update your project to that tag and give you the code of the first task. It actually contains some more of the optional points that I had in the slides, but I will skip them for now. Like how to show flash messages and how to validate that a good name is unique. This is actually showed in the code, you can check it out. All right, we'll do a short break now. I would like to continue in 15 minutes. Is that all right for you? You can grab some coffee and get something to drink and relax.